More becomes possible as we download the North Node Pisces version of ourselves. The North Node Pisces is a common attribute in those who have the 22 life path or heart soul urge. The only thing after perfection is to maintain. Prophet Muhammad once received the revelation from Allah that he completed the series of books which began with the Torah, and then the Gospel, and then Quran. And in that completion, Allah said to the people, I have completed my favor upon you, and I've called it Islam. And the companions or Sahaba of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of them named Umar bin Khattab, he began to weep at the fact that completion was reached. And so the people asked Umar bin Khattab, why are you weeping? And he explained to them, the only thing after perfection is to maintain. And I fear that the people will not maintain. So, the South Node Virgo is similar to that, in which we've learned that in all of our attempts towards perfection, it will never be satisfied because we are in fear of being found out as normal, regular, average, common, or even human. Attempting to pull off these attempts at resisting the fear of not having a status that really is just an illusion engineered for corporate interests. And we are learning to bow out of that. This can include, on a personal level, some skills, talents, gifts that we have that have reached a level of perfection or mastery. Being really good at refining a particular process. As Virgo represents the sixth house, it is what we process or how we process applications. This, of course, can make you the best barber in the town, the best hairstylist, the best landscaper, the best carpenter, the best engineer, the best basketball player, so on and so forth, with that mastery. So, what happens if in that nature we become rigid? In that nature, we become quite intolerant of anything less than what is ideal to us. What if we're meant to download a new reality like what we have never seen before? An experience in humanity collectively like what we have never seen before? And what if this download has to come from the heavens? Are we receptive? Do we have a mind that is open enough to receive the possibility that beyond what we know and beyond what we can control, there are innovative ideals and solutions that we could possibly be introduced to if we learn to have a receptive mind and heart? Here's the tricky part. Trusting the part of ourself that the corporate machine has left undeveloped. Developing those muscles of the spirit body. If we can do that, there's great fortune on the other side. There's so much that we have not taken into consideration about the meaning of our life, who we are, what we are supposed to be serving here, or how. Partly because we're in the limitations of what we're used to in jobs, careers, what we're doing in exchange for money. Time and money as being the only reason that we can come up with for any commitment. Time and money. Imagine we have a reason that goes beyond time and money. Imagine realizing value that extends beyond the fiat. This is where it gets tricky. It requires a memory of who we really are. Before the fictitious character, the incorporated person, the straw man image of ourselves, told us who we are. Who we are is a vast concept, a spiritual concept. It includes how we relate to compassion, understanding, and love. Universality in our intentions. Universality in our contributions. We're still at the plane of dualities that Uranus is going to help us to see beyond in order to get to the view of unity, and that is part of the context of what's coming in for us that we will hold hands to bring into this world. On the other side of fear, perversions, and self-undoings, addictions, distractions, escapism, when we can be peacefully present with the self, receptive and not overthinking in fear of who will reject us, who will laugh at us or make fun of us, who will betray us if we should be true to ourselves. Imagine that. Having the space to download and receive what was meant for you to channel to humanity. Let's get clear about who we are and what contribution we have in this world to show up with, that through the material realm we deliver spiritual value. Pisces North Node, while we're anticipating Saturn in retrograde, we're going to see higher levels of authority, obedience, boundaries, and accountability that wasn't there before. And what that will be is a revelation. Now that I have this faculty, this ability to master and command the self in any direction at any time without subjugating myself to burdens, karma, and depths. What is possible now? What is possible now that I'm in position to recreate myself as a free person and to maintain the freedom through keeping sight on accountability and moral commitment? What is possible now that I'm able to trust myself to communicate my boundaries and my consent? Now that I have this depth of trust with myself, how much more can I trust to work with others? Pisces points at unity, seeing that no no matter how different a person is, their beliefs, the personification, how they show up, as long as I have these faculties that Saturn is teaching us, I can allow you to be who you are, I can be who I am, and we can still accomplish a common interest without injury, insult, or shame, or burden, oppression, or injustice to others. It's going to take time to learn that we have reached this level. It may take even more time to realize what we can create together now that we are at this level. Relationships now takes the capacity of poly opportunities. Poly opportunities. Group efforts, community efforts, societal efforts of the same vibration, consistency, and ideals working together. We, the people, is finally going to be expressed sincerely and authentically. We are bringing in a world that we know is most appropriate. What happens when the power of our intuition, our clairvoyance, and our imagination is co-piloting with our cognitive understanding of this world? What happens when we regain the power of our imagination for ourselves instead of for a corporate objective? What happens when we take back our talents, our gifts, our skills, our intelligence, our passions, all of the power of arts that are in us, and we use them from our own heart for what God intended it to be in this world, in this life, instead of the greedy, slimy hands of rich reptilians? What happens when we finally retract from that centralized oppression and we figure it out that we are the ones who really has the power? Learning how to go to depths with each other because we can trust ourselves again to communicate, to negotiate, and to advocate for ourselves without harm, without offense, without disrespect, without disregard. Reinforcing the confidence to go great depths with each other. We learn powerful lessons. We learn powerful lessons that took quite a time in some generations in how to show up in relationships, that I am my best advocate, that saying no is not rude, disrespectful, or oppressive, but it's a requirement to be dignified at times. That having limitations in how I am to be treated, handled, talked to, or dealt with is no cause for me to feel guilt or shame in how someone responds to the self-esteem that I have to speak up for my best interests and what my inner child is clarifying for me there is a concern about. The lessons we move through has filled us with a great deal of confidence to navigate relationships and sophisticated opportunities. And you should trust yourself that you have learned that lesson. Happiness is my responsibility. Emotional security is my responsibility. Fulfillment is my responsibility. These were hard lessons to learn when we used to project it onto others to be responsible for how we want to feel. Look what we have overcome. This eclipse season, it's a turning point where our daily life and routine, 6th house, Virgo, and our ideals of work and service can find its way out of corporate design and source itself from the matriarchal foundation, Cancer, the moon, the inner child's need to express. And soon humanity will look like a reflection of heavens as we channel these divine forces as they were intended to be. I'll start out by saying Neptune and Pisces, these are symbolic forces. And with the North Node at Pisces and with Neptune now concentrating itself with Aries, the self and the greater world around you can only be comprehended in an esoteric sense. Otherwise, it's going to remain quite confusing who you are, why you're here, and the frustration of decoding the meaning and world events as it unfolds. The choice is ours, and rather or not, we want to put on the spiritual mindset that allows us to interpret and find clarity. The self as a spiritual expression and being, a spiritual status, it has to hold weight in our life. It has to mean everything to us. Its reality must be much more pronounced than the material reality that we invest so much energy and fear into. Mercury's transit through the South Node, Virgo, it has us to come to realizations in how our mindset, our thoughts, our thought process, our cognition, how all of our thinking can get in our way, and how to rearrange our thinking in such a way that leaves room for the spiritual forces, downloads, realizations, impulses that makes the picture complete. What ends up happening is that before Mercury passes through Virgo, our world could seem void, of what we were seeking. But after surrendering the tight and rigid grip on the mind, accommodating for quiet of mind and receptivity of Pisces downloads, right in an instant, as you're sitting and you're doing something just as simple as watching a bird dig for a worm, or a cat walking across the street, or a little child playing on a playground. It all comes to you that everything that you ever thought you were deprived of, or that passed you by, or where you thought you were eclipsed per se, it is already with you. It just took a spiritual comprehension, the power of spiritual fortitude, to receive it, to download it. It is a very thin membrane between this physical reality and the spiritual reality that is always there. To see behind the veil. When we gain mastery of Mercury's impulses and forces, a mind that is overworking itself, and leave room for Neptune and Venus, in consideration and respect for the number 9 impulse Hermit card, which appropriates Venus, which appropriates Neptune in our life to do as it is meant to, not to distract or pervert us, we finally will see through the veil. And seeing through the veil, sitting at the park bench could suddenly become a throne that you are sitting on, and you didn't even realize you were sitting on a throne, laced with gold and jewels. An environment that you look at with so much dissatisfaction could turn into a heavenly paradise once the veil is cracked in an instant, without moving a foot. This is what we're trying to achieve, is that access to see where you already are, what is already with you. That veil in the present moment with you. In this earthly realm, you may think you're just a plumber, you're a secretary, a banker, a car salesman, a mother, CNA, a dump truck driver. But when you see through the veil, you see the truth of who you are. It could shock you. That who you really are is an agent of heaven and all of your glory. And there are forces and gifts that are with you at your disposal to live a fulfilling life right from where you are with what you have, bringing in happiness, security, satisfaction, fulfillment that the rat race could have never accomplished for you. As Mercury makes its way to the South Node territory of Virgo, the South Node is under karmic purging, balancing, accountability. There's an alignment taking place, obviously, at the South Node. When Mercury transits Virgo, it's subject to that same process or order. Where does correction need to take place concerning Mercury? Mercury travels faster than the sun does. However, the presence of the sun and Mercury is simultaneous in the South Node territory of Virgo. This also is significant. Significant because just as Mercury is about to be karmically examined, balanced, and aligned with the new intention for evolution of what the North and South Node transit is adjusting us for, both our expression of the soul and the cognitive mind that navigates the soul through the physical realm and material density. There has to be a consistency with expression. There has to be a consistency with intellectual value. What we are being taught is how to incorporate superconscious with cognitive awareness and not allow our cognitive awareness, Mercury, not to allow the limitations of our logical capacity or intellectual capacity to block us out from what's being downloaded in favor of our evolution through the North Node Pisces. Pisces is a spiritual territory. Virgo is also a spiritual territory. But we could make the mistake of thinking that one is spiritual and one is not. Well, Virgo is to subject spiritual authority, awareness, practices into ritual, into process, to subject it to a formula that works. No pun intended for the sixth house Virgo work. Or should I say, yes, pun intended. When it comes to Virgo, the spiritual context has to do with how we are taking action, how we are managing, and how we are taking control of our destiny, which is a spiritual measure and expectation that we should have upon our own soul and why we arrived here in the earth. Through the sixth house, that is how we make all of our intentions possible. The sixth house is supposed to serve the aim, the intention, the goal, not the other way around. More room has to be made for spiritual downloads because remember that we are learning to decentralize from schedules, habits, ways, daily procedures, commitments that almost are entirely based on our careers. This can be very scary because we really don't know who we are outside of our total devotion to careers. Since 1902, when Rockefeller began organizing a public school system ideal that would make a workforce out of the people from grade school on up, total control, limitation of imagination, subjecting creative beings to formulas and orders, rules, commands, hierarchy, obedience and control that would lend all of their talent, their skill, and their intelligence, their vitality, their soul to a workforce, to a corporation, where they would get a very small fraction of the gains, the benefits, or the rewards of such labor. Here comes our freedom. If we have enough courage to reach for it, here comes our freedom. Rockefeller and Rothschild's ideals over humanity has finally come to an end. The Rockefeller ideals required a rigid personality trait for success, especially when it comes to personal and collective ambitions. What wins in that era is the Earth Trine. The Earth Trine, of course, consisting of Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. To have these traits strong or fortified naturally or in a developmental sense in Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, you are set up for great victory and success in the corporate world or realm. This does lead to a rigid nature and a nature that is quite reliant and dependent on mathematical, geometrical alignment, cognitive vitality, a great memory, a sense of sharp logistics, the ability to retain information and assimilate according to some instructions, guidance, directions, because hierarchy is a fundamental part of how we express through that earthy realm and the Rockefeller ideals. Everything is about time and money. Time and money, along with that, status. And there are many other nuances that comes along with this Rockefeller ideal. Perform, be the best, be ambitious, and this brings about a ruthlessness, a spirit of competition that leaves us quite Machiavellian and insensitive in how we express our humanity. Very quickly, we learn that the more success or prosperity that we want in these Rockefeller type realms, goals and aims, we have to shed away our moral convictions in order to climb so high. We have to sell our soul to climb so high. You will have to put on a value system that could be void of a conscience. Not conscious, but conscience, which we know that relates to our connection with the moon, lunar power, and Cancer. And we trade the conscience for intuitive opportunity, of course, but that intuition is in strategizing how to master certain skill sets and capabilities to earn more money or to outmaneuver any competitors in our realm. This type of atmosphere of so much ambition and how much we have to become so desensitized to climb these corporate ladders and be so competitive in these ways, we bring it home and we groom our children to also think and sense their way through the world in the same attitude and demeanor. And what we seem to leave behind is our moral commitment every time. The more ruthless that you can be, the more insensitive that you can be, the more arrogant, the more heartless and cold, the less connected that you can groom yourself to be to your emotions and your clairvoyance, the spiritual parts of yourself that guides you toward expressions of love and compassion. You will simply fall by the wayside to those who are willing to be more ruthless than you. Only the most ferocious of animals make it all the way to the top. And we've even come to a point in our world to romanticize, to praise and admire those who make it to that top. We have the movies like Scarface. We have the movies like The Godfather. We have the, in Hollywood, how we like to celebrate the ruthlessness of this Rockefeller-seeded spirit in us, this Ahrimanic impulse in us that we have fed for so long. Even in hip-hop music, if you listen to hip-hop music since Jewish people infiltrated it, starting with the NWA, turning it into a marketing scheme and turning it into a way to source the youth into the back door of the private prison industrial complex, it turned into something quite ferocious that celebrates and romanticizes these Rockefeller, Ahrimanic, ruthless, capitalistic, corporate mindsets of competition, get to the bag, money, 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 greed at all costs, murder, shoot, kill, steal, lie, and destroy. Whoever is the slickest or wisest criminal is the one who gets championed the most. We collectively agreed to create this disposition in our ideals of who is great, who is the hero, and who is not. We even have statues that commemorate characters and personalities who have this ruthlessness. It's the very way that America itself was established by the settlers, the European settlers who came here, and the Spanish settlers who came here. It was on that ruthlessness. It was on that vicious, inhumane trait that has lasted since time can be remembered in modern times, since the Spanish Inquisition. Since the Spanish Inquisition and the victory over the Muslims and the Jews, specifically the nappy-headed Jews and Moorish Muslims, things became different to where the Roman Constantinian Christian Catholicism that upheld the universal unum sanctum that incorporated the entire world into an Ahrimanic expression rather than a humanitarian expression, things became very cold, ruthless, and dark. This is when the Ahriman took over the entire earth in all nations with the exception of Ethiopia. And Italians tried over and over again to accomplish that. They were not necessarily successful in doing so. This is a fight with the Ahriman. They have lasted for a very long time, spreading themselves throughout the earth after the Spanish Inquisition through the doctrine of discovery to all nations of the earth under the entitlement of the Pope Bull Unum Sanctum, and then to the shores of the Americas under the Manifest Destiny. And it still continues today as you see this corporate greed that spreads in the same formula with Israel. Israel, a corporate state run by European conquistadors and settlers, posing and pretending to be Jews, posing and pretending to be Judaic religious zealots, when they have nothing whatsoever to do with the religion of Judaism, not even in a slight way. They don't even allow DNA testing over there because it will expose their fraudulent claims of being Jews, which they are not. They are the same Europeans that took over this nation of United States. The same people. And so, with all of this, of the Ahriman's attempt to keep control, and that Capricorn controlling, domineering, rigid energy, it's being offered to humanity to have another option, another direction, another choice, to have the grace to rise higher in frequency, where yes, grace and protection comes with it. Immunity comes with it. A claim of the true identity as the spiritual being, the agent of heaven, it comes with it. That status, that jurisdiction, that estate, the inheritance of the legacy of those in the earth who ran the earth in such a spiritual way before these conquistadors ever began spreading their Ahrimanic will over the earth in this Capricorn energy under Unum Sanctum, doctrine of discovery, which was the spread of the Spanish Inquisition. We even have the rise today of Christian nationalism, which essentially is white supremacy. And that white supremacy commemorates the Roman Constantinian ideal of the supremacy of the trait white race. Now, we have the option to allow the downloading of this spiritual consciousness that returns the earth back to, globally, its spiritual matriarchal expression of humanity rather than this patriarchal expression of humanity. The matriarchal expression of humanity that includes unity, honoring the earth and nature, celebration of beauty, art, sciences, so on and so forth, but without the intent or will towards greed, pure greed, greed and domination, blood, violence, greed, and domination. It is a spiritual collective will over the earth. Just as before, these conquistadors went from nation to nation to take over every people of the earth. Every people of the earth that they ran into was of a matriarchal establishment. And what do I mean of matriarchal establishment? They had a conscience, for one. And we know that the conscience, the origin of the conscience, is a lunar force. It is of Cancer, the divine mother. It is our awareness of the power of good over the power of evil. The authority and right of that which is right over that which is wrong. It is to have an awareness of the effect that we have upon others. It is the will to connect and not dominate. It is to feel and be sensitive to the suffering, the pain of others. These are the things that were found all throughout the earth with every people, every nation, every religion, until the European conquistador spread the Spanish Inquisition through the doctrine of discovery. They were the first people on earth to express a desensitized, Ahrimanic, Capricorn, Shadow 8, Shadow Saturn, black energy over the earth that entirely was about enterprise, greed, consumption, competition, domination, violence, bullying, terror, fear-mongering, dirty politics, putting one against the other, full-out deception in measures that could never be imitated again in earth. And it's the same people all over this entire earth who did it to every people all over the entire earth. It's the same people. There is one people who has a trend of going to every single nation in the earth, spreading Ahrimanic, Capricorn shadow, patriarchal domination. And it spread into the ideals of these other nations, these other practices that other countries, religious societies, nations were into, incorporating that into their culture in order to stay at the speed of the modern developmental world. People began to adopt these policies, adopt these practices, adopt this mindset and these ideals of government and cultural expression that only would lead to the same outcome, oppressing themselves and others. So this Pisces North Node download is reconnecting the entire earth with spirit, just as it was before the conquistadors interrupted everybody on the fucking earth. It's bringing it back. And what comes with that, Pisces, is to recognize meaning and symbolism. It recognizes meaning and symbolism. When we have Mercury coming into the South Node at Virgo, that is to align the mind in a way where it does not dominate the perception, but it makes room in the perception for Neptune or Pisces at the north node, its natural polarity, to be incorporated in the meaning that it becomes aware of or sees. In other words, it is the download of the ability to cognitively recognize patterns as symbols of spiritual expressions and meanings, to recognize events cognitively as spiritual meanings and clues, signs. And this is how animism was born. This is how gnosis was born. Venus has to be included in what we remember of gnosis being born, because of course Lucifer or Venus is the one who taught humanity gnosis. And what is Neptune at the north node? That is the lord of the north node, Neptune. Neptune is the higher exponent of Venus. It is the higher exponent of Venus. And the higher exponent of Venus, what it does is it connects all of the astral bodies through Venus into a collective expression, a collective will, a collective knowing that becomes a new era through our collective conscious. And from this turning point of Mercury at the south node Virgo, we then are going to start to recognize everything that we see as a spiritual symbol, because the cognitive mind has to pair with that, and so does the sun or the heart center. So once we start to use our cognitive mind to see symbolism, spiritual symbolism, in everything that occurs in life, everything that is around us in our environment, we have returned to animism, we have returned to gnosis, which is our origin. We have returned to the ability to see and comprehend spiritual communication from the heavens right here in earth. And our guiding compass is something that we who have allowed our hearts to download this can read, but those who are of those vibrations of aromatic impulse, it's incomprehensible to them. It's incomprehensive to them. They cannot comprehend it. That is where our marching orders will come from. That is where our guidance collectively will come from. This is how we will know: go left, go right, stand down, march forward. This is where it all will download from after this transit. You have the arts such as voodoo, which was African animism in disguise under French colonization, French Catholicism. You have Santeria, which is African animism under disguise of Spanish colonization, Catholicism. And you have hoodoo, African animism under disguise under Christian Roman Christian nationalism or Constantinianism. That was animism. Even when you observe the Catholic Church, it is still animism. It's just that Constantine politicized and incorporated the people's religion. Then you have animism, as we know, in some of the earliest origins with ancient Kemet, and as well as Judaism. Judaism began with the practice of animism. It began with gnosis. It began with esoteric wisdom. Just as ancient Kemetic religions began with esoteric wisdom. So this is the return back to esoteric as the standard. When you pull tarot cards, It's symbolism that expresses and explains spiritual values, which brings the cognitive mind, Mercury, together with the universal spiritual symbolism and understanding of Gnosis, which incorporates both Neptune and Venus. Venus being the personalized interpretation through Luciferic impulse. And then you have the Neptunian expression, which is the collective value and meaning of spiritual powers, forces, authorities, and ideals, meaning symbols, expressions that we tap into, which I recognize as Orisha Olokun, Olokun, if you want to read about it. So this is the return as esoteric spirituality as a natural faculty for every person. And what it does is it repurposes Capricorn. The esoteric is expressed through Capricorn in the earth realm. When you see a person with a strong Capricorn stellium, especially with Neptune at that stellium, that is a person who is destined to or meant to navigate their life with esoteric knowledge, esoteric wisdom. So now signs and symbols become comprehensible cognitively as it makes space for Neptune and Venus to read for the purpose and intention of heaven and not for the reasons that we had to clean up. The reasons that we had to clean up through two particular planets, Venus and Neptune, had to do with, through Neptune at Pisces, we had to clean up fears. We had to clean up vices. We had to clean up addictions. We had to clean up escapism. We had to clean up all of the behaviors, traits, and things that we used to practice to escape realities that we didn't understand how to control or align with. It's where our perversions were at. The 12th house, the shadows, the 7 sins, the inheritance of dark covenants, the inheritance of generational curses. We had to clean these things up so that the power of Neptune and Pisces could make space, capacity for the expression of spiritual awareness, love, unity, unification, seeing unity, seeing through the eyes of God rather than the eyes of fear, and downloading that which the cognitive mind cannot comprehend, cannot articulate. Eternal wisdom. Essentially what this is the Christ impulse. We are downloading collectively the Christ impulse as all of this expressed together that I am explaining. All of this together is the Christ impulse. And the Christ impulse, we know that that is the wisdom of God. We being that, we internalizing that, we manifesting and expressing that collectively together. Incoming is the collective spiritual downloads. We are turning over to collectively a natural disposition of comprehending the world through esoteric understanding. As we have experiences throughout our world or our life, we naturally are going to relate with each other on this. There are many of you out there who already understand these things, but let's remember that most people, the collective of the world, they do not understand it. But now it will become the common standard. But many of you who are more advanced and well versed out there, it very well could be that you are the light workers that will guide others in how to utilize or how to comprehend what they are experiencing and seeing and finally realizing and connecting with. You look at the Native Americans, you look at ancient Kemet, you look at African spiritual tradition and symbolism, you look at ancient Arabic or Muslim practices of animism as well, before the monotheistic lies that were expressed over the interpretations of Islamic wisdom. Okay, they put full control over that through the Spanish Inquisition, because Muslims used to also practice animism. They also practice esoteric wisdom and knowledge in those earlier days before the Spanish Inquisition began to control and Roman Constantinianism began to control all religious expressions and ideals into limitations that pose no threat to them, which was through spiritual power. Spiritual power has always been a threat to them. Why do you think they vilified and demonized even witchcraft? Witchcraft has been demonized. Animism has been demonized. They call Native Americans savages in their spiritual practice. The one thing that they are terrified of is spiritual power. But spiritual power is exactly what we are downloading. It is what we are returning to. It is what everyone of the earth except these people have been upon since day one. There isn't a nation on earth who didn't have the same practice, in different language and different culture, the same practice. If I go through all of the deities or orishas of African spiritual tradition, Yoruba, the Oguns, the Oshuns, the Yemaya, the Oya, the Egbe, the Iyami, so on and so forth. All of these names are specific to Nigerian or Benin expressions of animism. However, it is universal. The same identities carry through ancient Kemet and Native American traditions, Hindu, so on and so forth. It is also in the Bible. You have Peter, called Simon, which is Pisces. You have John the Baptist, which represents Aquarius and Sagittarius. So it's one. It looks like duality, but it is one. And astrology is before all of it. Astrology is before all of it. We know that astrology extracts meaning and intention from the universe. And that starts with the planets and the mathematical and geometrical expressions of the planets. From there, Gnosis, as Lucifer taught us Gnosis, became culturalized as oratory storytelling. Okay? It began with oratory storytelling. And the oratory storytelling established a crystallization of wisdom and very basic concepts of symbolism, architectural values, archetypal values, and storylines that carry the flow, evolution, expression, and manifestation of all of these principles as they work together, so that the child can understand it and grow with its meaning. Because if the child does not understand If the child does not memorize and internalize it, it is lost. If there are no children to inherit the wisdom, it is lost. So it has always been simplified as stories, not as books, as stories. And those stories are told, telling the same story from culture to culture, from religion to religion. The same story. And every story can be found in astrology. Every story transcends other religions. Every story tells the same story from religion to religion, from spiritual practice to spiritual practice. It is never, ever in contradiction. It is always the same. So as the child grows with the very basic story, wisdom has it so that knowledge upholds the human's capacity to extract wisdom from it in reflection to their experiences, or in reflection to their competence as they grow. So as you grow in experience and competence, more meaning gets extracted out of the oratory narratives that are explained in gnosis and spirituality and early expressions of spiritual gnosis. So as you grow, you realize more meaning in those stories. If I give an example, in the story about Oshun and Ogun, where Ogun begat technology and gave technology to the world, which is Mars, the god of war, the god of iron. This is Ifa Yoruba tradition. The people of the civilization became angry with Ogun because although it benefited much the people, it also did a lot of harm to nature. As you know, building and construction, it does good, but it also balances out. It does as much harm as it does good, okay, with tearing down trees and, the conflict that it has with nature, so on and so forth, waste, okay, all of those different things, byproducts of construction. And so the people began to complain because they seen that much harm was being done, even though it was beneficial. It was not Ogun's intention to bring that harm, but in realizing that, he became depressed, he became sad, and he retracted and ran away into the wilderness. He hid away. And when he went into the wilderness, because he was not being celebrated anymore, the people didn't like him. They were holding him accountable to the fact that what he gave did much harm to nature. And all of the Orishas began to wonder, where is Ogun? Because without Ogun, we cannot progress in civilization, in society. What can we do without technology? What can we do without war? What can we do without the blacksmith? What can we do without the surgeon? What can we do without the element of iron? So all of the Orishas tried to lure him out of the wilderness, to negotiate to get him to come out, and he refused. And so there was one Orisha who tried. She was the last to try, and it was Oshun. And Oshun, representing Venus, okay, representing Venus, she is the mother of sweet waters, the mother of natural waters, the mother of rivers, the mothers of harmonization, justice, fair dealing, and what inspires love. She's a mother of what inspires love. She rules Libra, obviously, as you know, in Taurus, the 7th house and the 2nd house. Also the mother of beauty, which is most important to note in this. So Venus representing the element of copper, just as Mars represents the element of iron, okay? So with Venus representing the element of copper, keep in mind, okay, what I'm narrating is that how these stories, in a young mind, they may not comprehend that part, okay, but they are comprehending the story. So Oshun came to lure Ogun out of the wilderness. And what she did was she adorned herself with honey, and she made herself very attractive and decorated, and she put bells about her ankles and jewelry, and she had someone to play, the drums, the music, and she danced and danced and danced where she knew Ogun was watching and could see her beauty, and she's dancing. And so she charmed and attracted him out. She used sexual power to lure him out. She made herself seem sexually accessible to him. And through that, Ogun was inspired to come out of the wilderness. And that's when he came out and saved the world. So, in parallel, as you grow in wisdom, as you grow in competence and experience with the world, you're able to extract from this story that this is part of social science. Just like we have young men today in the face of feminism, you have American girls who tell young men that, they're dusty, they're broke if they don't make $100,000, or if you work a 9 to 5, you dusty, you broke, I don't want nothing to do with you. Young men of America are, they're recluse. They retracted back into their mother's basements, playing video games, smoking weed, and jacking off. And so how do you get the young men to come back out? How do you get them to play a role in society that's more productive at the capacity that we have in the numbers of males in our society? Our males are laying out. They're not showing up for the blue collar jobs. They're not picking up the trades and the skills and the crafts, things of that nature. They're not showing the aggressive nature of getting involved in the world, okay? They're laying out. Why is that? Because of feminism, okay? And so what I mean by feminism is it gives a bad report or bad feedback. It gives negative feedback to those, males of society. And of course, I'm speaking about the principle of Ogun or Mars, okay, retracting back into the wilderness based on this feedback. And so the same thing is happening in principle of the Mars archetype or the male. Okay, they're getting negative feedback based on the social engineered mindset of feminism from the female counterpart. And so that drives them back into the wilderness. Who can lure them out? Only she can. Just as Oshun was the one who lured Ogun out, the female archetype, which is the young, adolescent of female representation, is the only one who can lure their interests out of dormancy. That's natural social science. And it's the same thing with elements. When you consider on an elemental basis, where Mars represents iron, Venus represents copper. And we know that if you have an iron deficiency, where iron is not being absorbed out of the intestinal tract, where iron is not making it through the bloodstream, where it plays a beneficial or constructive role toward the vitality of the body, it is copper that attracts iron out of the intestinal tract. It is copper that lures iron back out into the bloodstream to be accessible. So I told that long narration to explain where we're returning back to, and that is the power of gnosis, the power of esoteric wisdom, the power of seeing the meaning, symbolism, and value of what's in the spiritual realm, what's in the spirit, in the physical, what's in the physical realm, what's in the physical patterns of our doings, and of the symbolism that is included in that, in order to comprehend spiritual wisdom, insight, value, and even power and authority, and aligning with it. Okay, so Mercury has to go to the south node to remove and separate itself from what has been blocking the receptivity to Neptune, Venus, and Pisces as spiritual downloads. What has been blocking the receptivity of spiritual downloads? As the eclipse takes place, the North Node is at the second decan of Pisces, which is lunar. Okay, that is lunar. So this includes the conscience as well. It includes the intuition. And it also suggests a fog. It is a foggy state. Okay, it remains a foggy state until there is facilitation for that state of peace or quiet of mind. When peace or quiet of mind is facilitated, then download is what that second decan becomes. It becomes a place of download. It calls in for download. Download can't happen if there's too much mental activity of rigid nature that is seeking for control, that is seeking for the manifestation of what is expected, and that is seeing contradictions or dualities in what is around it. Because then it gets preoccupied with solving those problems or controlling the dilemmas at hand, or the perceived or idealized dilemmas at hand, instead of being open or receptive to the meaning and value of what's already downloading or being presently expressed. So our own mind can get in the way or become the very thing that blocks our access to the superconscious or through the imagination. And Neptune downloads what is in the ether or spiritual realm for everyone to have access to. You know, if there's a song that a genius writes, it didn't come from their heart. They simply reached up for it in the heavens and brought it down. Anybody could have brought that song down. Who's in position to receive it? Who's in position to download it? Because every great thing that bless humanity as an invention, as an art, as an expression, or as you know, songs or different things like that, that really blesses humanity in that universal way, it came from that power of Neptune and Pisces. It came down from heaven. You reached for it and you downloaded. You made space and accommodation for that energy to flow through you. It's like the dove that chose to sit on your shoulder instead of the other person's shoulder, because you carried more energy of peace than the other person did, or you were more receptive than the other person was. We don't own the gifts that we channel. Even as, for example, like, you know, I align myself to be able to channel astrological interpretation, but I don't own it. I'm just a receptacle. I chose to put myself under the circumstances, condition, lifestyle that allows me to be receptive of and standing in the conditions to be able to receive and channel at will astrological download and interpretation. It's the same thing when I'm pulling tarot cards. You know, it's what we bring in or bring through. But it already exists before us. It already is there. It doesn't originate with, you know, oh, you're so smart. No, you downloaded and you received what already has been prepared, what already is available. Everything that we will ever bring in is already existent and available. So it's Mercury coming to the South Node in order to be subjected to, the downloading activity that has to take place from Pisces, from heaven. The mind cannot be in an expression that contradicts or gets in the way of that taking place. We have to take control of that mind, and we have to release perfectionism. We have to release the idea that we have to have everything so perfect, and we have to have so much control over things, and we have to be so rigid that everything has to be a certain way, because that poses a sharp limitation where what you may have to download or what you may have to receive or bring in could be something much greater or of a unique design that contradicts what you have already idealized and formed in your head, and now it doesn't fit, and you're so focused on the fact that it doesn't match what you thought it should be, and you discard it because of that, not knowing that what was downloaded is much better than that which you have idealized and attached yourself to in your cognitive mind. It's like, oh, I want this type of car or this type of truck, and then somebody says, hey, I got a perfect truck for you or whatever else, or a perfect car for you, and because it doesn't match the idea that you had, you just, oh, no, I want nothing to do with that. But then later on you begin to see, wow, actually that was the perfect thing, because it had this feature or it had that feature, but I was idealizing something else, and it really poses a limitation. So there could be a form which goes with the rigid nature of Earth expression, Virgo, Taurus, and also Capricorn. There could be a rigid nature form that you have that poses a limitation for what's supposed to manifest through Pisces. Because what manifests through Pisces, of course, it is a formless expression. The formless expression has to find a form, but you can't make a form before that it downloads, because now you have a limitation. You got a problem. You have to. It's kind of like it's just like you're taking your kid shopping, and you don't know what size they wear. You know what I'm saying? Like let's say your kid was away for the summertime. You know what I'm saying? And they went to grandma's house for the summer, and they come back, and you go buy your kid some shoes or a jacket for the school season, and they grew. They're not the same size. So you went ahead and you got that shoe size or that jacket size, and when they come back, you're like, hold up, man, I had it all planned out. You was going to wear this jacket, you was going to wear these shoes or whatever, and it don't even fit them. You see what I'm saying? So you can't have a rigid, locked in ideal or mind. You got to open it up, loosen it up, because what is going to start downloading into our life is from heaven. It's not from it's not from our small minds. We have to accommodate what comes through. So don't make a form of something that you didn't pull tape on. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, for example, as a matter of fact, like I've done scaffolding for many years too. Okay. I do different forms of carpentry. One form of carpentry that I do is scaffolding. Okay, pin lock, cup lock, frame, so on and so forth. So if a client is telling me, hey, we need scaffolding in front of this school building, right? And they say, I need a quote. How can I give a quote if I don't come over there and pull tape? I got to pull tape first before I could give you a quote, because I got to know what type of equipment material do we need, what size, equipment for different features, of the building, and different things of that nature. You can't draw, you can't draw a blueprint. You can't make a drawing or graphics of the design that you're going to give them or propose to them if you didn't pull tape. So this Mercury mindset of having to control everything, it's like us wanting to order the material, build something, and give a proposal, and we didn't even pull tape. Okay, what's coming through Pisces is what we have to pull tape on. You can't pull tape on something that ain't fucking there. You know what I mean? So as things download to you in your life, then you pull tape on it, then you find a form, then you create a form for it. You subject it to a form, and what has to be given form is the ideals, what comes through imagination of value expression, and ideals that comes through Pisces. You have to give it form, but you can't create rigid form before it downloads. And you can't download if you're not at peace. You can't download if your life is not peaceful. You know what I'm saying? So you already made this form of a 5x6, but what comes through Pisces is a 7x8. So now what you gonna do? Now you gotta tear apart the 5x6 because you in a fucking rush and you want shit to go the way the fuck you want to. But what comes from Pisces as you downloaded it, oh, it's a 7x8. Now, now you have to reconfigure it. So we have to leave room to be co-creators. Co-creators. You are co-creating with the agency of heaven. You are co-creating with angels. You are co-creating with ancestors. You are co-creating with spirit guides. You are co-creating with the forces of heaven and earth. You are co-creating with your orishas. You are co-creating with archangels. You are co-creating. And you're no longer in this Capricorn reality where we're totally ignoring the spiritual power and reality that is around us and that transcends all that we are and all that we do. We now are at the stage where all of us collectively have to give full acknowledgement and accommodation to the spirituality. And we have to become carpenters and framers of what we're realizing as it downloads and comes through. And a lot of it has to do with what we need as services and accommodation for who we are now as a collective, because we have outlived the old expression of being human. We have outlived it. We're at a much higher place now, and it requires heaven to give us resources of consciousness, intelligence, expression, creative ideas that are perfect for our world. So I hope I didn't botch that up. I'm trying to explain it the best way I can. The feedback helps. That way I know how to perfect my delivery. You know what I mean? Thank you for listening. Like, share, subscribe. Definitely schedule for your natal birth chart reading personally to understand how these eclipse events will take effect for you. Also, don't overlook synastry chart readings. Let's remember the children. Let's remember the kids. There's a youth that maybe you have a hard time understanding. And astrology is a way to really understand every one of your kids without getting your ego or your limited views in the way. And so that you know how to approach them effectively rather than from what you're used to or how your mother used to do it or father used to do it. Let's get the real understanding. The same thing for your spouse or your significant other.